If you want to pass your aircraft maintenance engineering cars examination, try to answer this question. Where can you find the AME privilege in cars? A. AWM 571. B. Cars 403. C. Cars 202. D. AWM 566. Alright guys, so before I tell you guys the right answer, we're gonna go through some of these options here. We're gonna go through the option, A, which is AWM 571. We're gonna go through cars 403, 202, and AWM 566, and we're gonna understand what each of them means, right? In the cars. So when it comes to cars, there are different type of parts. It's about several of them. When it comes to memorizing them, I usually tell you guys to memorize them. This is one of the topic I usually recommend people to memorize, and that is because it's a lot. It's a lot, and if you memorize it the right way, definitely you can pass these cars easily, right? So before I tell you guys the right answer, the first thing I want to teach you guys is in cars, right? The middle number can come in three ways, right? It can be 0, 2, 4. And as you guys can see right here, so let's say for example, we have a cars that is 101, right? Um, if the number is zero, that means it's a regulation, right? A regulation tells you you must do something. You must follow this. That is regulation. Before you can sign a maintenance release, you must have an AME license, right? That is a regulation. And if you see the middle number is a 2, that means it's a standard. Basically, standard tells you how to do something. The procedures of how to do something. If it's a 4, that means it's an advisory material. Advisory materials are materials that are not really. It's like additional information to a regulation, basically, right? Additional guidance to regulation. But for the most part, you will see 0 and 2. But there is one part that has different type of assembling, right? And which is part 5. So part 5, it's a really unique part, and this is one question they can ask you in your examination, that which part has the combination of regulation and standard, right? Cars part is one of those part that has is the only part that has the combination of regulation and standard. That means in cars part 5, you're gonna find something like 505, and you're gonna find something like 5 2 something, and also in cars 5, you're gonna see numbers like 6 and 7, right? That means it's a standard, and that is for only cars 5. So now let's start with the option A, which is AWM 571. And just looking at this option, right? From what I just told you guys, your 0 is regulations, your 2 is standard, and your 4 is advisory material. Just looking at this question, you can actually evaluate two options, right? And the reason why is I told the question is, where can you find the AME privilege? AME privilege is not a regulation, right? It's more like the privilege too. So whenever, okay, imagine if I'm saying, where can you find the privilege of having a driver license, right? It's not a law. It's not a law that tells you you must have a driver license to drive. But where can you find the privilege? So privilege means if you have a driver license, you can drive. You know what I mean? That's a privilege, So it's not a regulation. So me just having these me just understanding 0 is regulation, 2 is standard, 4 is the best match. I can easily evaluate two options, which is B and C, because these are regulations, right? Those are not standard, those are not procedures, right? But anyways, I'm still gonna go through each options and explain it in detail, right? So let's start with the first one, AWM 571. So we know the first number is 5, so that means it's airworthiness, right? So it's part of the airworthiness. So for 571 is basically focused on maintenance, right? On how maintenance is meant to be done. Basically, basically 571 is focused on how maintenance can be done. And also in 571, you're going to find where who can sign a maintenance release, right? And there are different type of maintenance. You have modifications, you have repair, you have elementary work, you have inspection. There are different type of maintenance, right? So in 571 are where you're going to find where and how to do maintenance, right? So it's either how to do a repair, how to do a modification, how to perform an elementary work, and also you're going to find who can sign a maintenance, right? A maintenance release, right? So let's say for elementary work, for example, right? Elementary work is one of those maintenance that does not require maintenance release. So basically, anyone can basically sign an elementary work, and the reason why is elementary works are non-critical jobs, right? You're talking about changing a bulb, for example, right? Like it's not going to affect the aircraft modifications. It's not going to affect the aircraft type design. You're not working on a critical system, right? So, but for you to sign an elementary work, you need some type of approval from the owner of the aircraft, but you don't need an AME license to sign a elementary work, right? And let's say, for example, modification, right? For you to perform, there are different type of modification. For you to perform a modification, you need some type of approval, right? Let's say a major repair, for example, right? You need the RCA, right? RDA, which is a repair design approval by engineering. It could be approved data, it could be specific data, right? You need some type of approval to perform a modification, to perform a repair, right? So 571 is the part that you can see those information all based on maintenance, basically, right? So let's move to the next option, which is 403. So part 4 is mostly focused on personal licensing and rating, right? So for everyone that is involved in aviation, that and when it comes to personal licensing for pilots, for flight attendants, for ATC, like that's where you can find the licensing, right? For AME, you can find the A licensing. But for us, AME license, our our licensing is mostly focused on where can you find information for AME licensing and rating is in 403, right? You just got to understand 403 is where you can find the AME licensing and rating. And what did they mean by AME licensing and rating, right? So there are different categories in AME license. You have the M1, you have the M2, you have your E license, you have the S license. Those are all considered AME license, right? And that is where you can find those information. All right. So let's move on to the next one, which is cars 202. We know by seeing 202, we know is already a regulation. So for 202, 202 is mostly focused on aircraft leasing and registration. So basically, right, it's for aircraft registry. So basically, right, there's a law that for every aircraft to fly, right, before you can fly an aircraft, just like your car, you have to register your car to drive it on the road, right? Same thing goes to aircraft, right? For you to be able to fly an aircraft, you need to register your aircraft. And where can you find that? Cars 202. That's a regulation, right? You must register your aircraft. For an aircraft to fly, you need some type of tail number, right? Or people call it fin number, right? For Canadian aircraft, you see fin numbers like 421, five, like any unit. For you to fly in Canada, you need some type of tail number, right? And where can you find that? That is in 202, right? That is a regulation. You must have a fin number to do that, right? For measurements, for every fin number, there's a standard measurement, right? There's a standard measurement for every fin number that has to be, followed by manufacturer. Where can you find it? 202. That is a regulation, right? And the last option is AWM 566. And this is mostly focused for AME, right? When it comes to the two things, three, there are some cars parts you gotta be able to understand. And that is why the reason why is because they are focused for AME. 4 3, that's where you can find AME licensing and everything. 566, that's where you can find AME privilege, right? And 571, that's where you can find maintenance, right? So when it comes to AME privilege, you can find it in 566. And what do they mean by AME privilege, right? So for every maintenance done, right, we have the AME license. Now we have the privilege to sign a maintenance release for that maintenance done. Right. That is a privilege. It's not a law. It's a privilege because we have an AME license, right? We can sign a maintenance release. Just like your driver license. A driver license is a privilege, right? Because you have the driver license, you can drive a car. If you have your pilot license, because you have a pilot license, you can fly a plane, right? So those are privileges. Those are not regulation. Regulation is before you drive, you need a driver license, right? That is a regulation. It's not a privilege, right? And where can you find the privilege for AME license is 566. And 566 tells you who can sign a maintenance release. The privilege is because we have an AME license, we have the privilege to sign a maintenance release. Because we have an AME license, we can satisfy that the aircraft is safe to fly, the aircraft can fly because of our AME license, right? So when it comes to, hopefully you guys understand, I try to keep it as simple as possible. um I'm just gonna go back to do like a summary of the key stuff you guys got to understand. When it comes to the middle number, right, you have 0 2 4, right? 0 is for regulation, 2 is for standard, 4 is for adversary material, right? When it comes to the cars, there are 7 cars parts, right? I love when you guys memorize it because it's way more easier for you to remember, right? And for AME license, you just gotta focus on cars 403, right? Which it tells you the AME licensing and rating, right? And cars 566 tells you the AME privilege. 571 tells you maintenance, how maintenance is meant to be done, right? So when it comes to this option, like I told you guys, just reading this option and understanding just this first notes right here, you can tell option B and C is not the right answer, right? And that is because those are regulation. Privilege is more like a standard, right? So now we are left to 571. We are left to 566. I told you guys 571 is focused mostly on maintenance, right? How types of maintenance, who can sign the maintenance, right? Different type of maintenance. We have modifications, we have repair, we have elementary work, right? That's where you can find those information. You can find it in standard AWM 571. But for AME, who can sign? But for the privileges for having an AME license, right? You can find it in AWM 566. So the right answer here is AWM 566. I'm just gonna make this red, right? This is the right answer here, right? So hopefully you guys understand this quick demonstration. If you guys like this type of videos, let me know in the comment section. I'm going to be making more series of this AME course, and this is all based on past experience because I have done this examination before. I have also helped apprentices to do this examination a couple times. So if you're an apprentice that need that type of help, you need someone to guide you through, you need someone to show you the right questions, the right places to read, you need someone to help you out so you can pass your examination 80% and above. This is something I help apprentices with. Click the link in the description and book a consultation and let me see how I can help you out. All right. For you guys that are new to my channel, my name is Peter. I am a licensed aircraft maintenance engineer and I help aircraft maintenance engineers to pass the CARS examination 80% and above. I help aircraft maintenance engineers to build their resume, to prepare them for interview, right? So if you guys need that type of help, like I said, click the link in the description and book a consultation. And if you guys like my video, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Love you guys.